This presentation will cover the anatomy and physiology involved with the sense of smell. We all know that the nose acts as the portal of entry involved with the sense of smell. The air goes up through the nares and passes by the olfactory mucosa in the superior aspect of the nasal cavity. Molecules within the air, called ligands, can then diffuse into the mucosa and will trigger olfactory sensation. We'll talk about how all of this occurs and all of the structures that are involved. This picture shows the position of the olfactory structures within the nasal cavity. As air comes into the nares, it circles around, and the ligands in the air can find the olfactory mucosa, which is the epithelial tissue located at the top of the nasal cavity. The surface of the olfactory mucosa is lined with a layer of mucus. Within the olfactory mucosa, you can find olfactory receptor neurons. These cells have cilia that extend down into the mucus and search out ligands that get caught. The olfactory receptor neurons also travel in the other direction, which is up through the cribriform plate of the ethmoid bone. There they join the olfactory bulb, that is a massive collection of cells that lies within the cranium just under the frontal lobes of the brain. The olfactory receptor neurons synapse onto other neurons within the bulb, which have axons that come together and forms the olfactory tract, also known as cranial nerve number 1. The olfactory tract then extends into the higher levels of the brain to give the person the sense of smell. As you can see from this picture, the olfactory receptor neurons are intermingled with supporting epithelium cells within the olfactory mucosa. As you can see at the bottom of the picture, the olfactory receptor neurons have cilia that extend down into a layer of mucus and act to bind ligands that dissolve into the mucus. The axons of the olfactory receptor neurons then extend up through the neurovascular bundles that pass through the olfactory lamina propria and through the cribriform plate. Also found within this region are Bowman's glands. These glands secrete mucus into the epithelial surface to keep the mucus moist for optimal ligand binding.
In this histologic view, you can see the location of the cilia indicated by the large black arrows at the bottom, the cell bodies of the supporting cells and the olfactory receptor neurons, and a large Bowman's gland on the right, with its ducts reaching into the epithelial surface. The arrow on the right is pointing to the duct of Bowman's gland. The sense of smell is also known as olfaction. In order for olfaction to occur, certain physiologic mechanisms need to happen. It is important to understand that most substances put off small molecules, referred to as ligands, into the air, which diffuse through the air and potentially make their way into the human nasal cavity. When they reach the nasal cavity, they come into contact with the mucus of the olfactory epithelium. At this point, the ligands will dissolve into the mucus and may activate certain proteins receptors on the cilia of the olfactory receptor neurons. When the receptors are activated, depolarization occurs and the action potential is set up in the cell through the cribriform plate and to the olfactory bulb. When it reaches the bulb, it synapses on the dendrites of the cells called mitral cells. This synapsis causes the mitral cells to depolarize and fire an action potential. Their actions then join the olfactory tract, which travel to certain regions of the brain. The axons of the olfactory tract project to various regions of the cortex. Certain odors trigger certain olfactory receptor neurons, which trigger certain mitral cells, which then activate certain neural networks within the cortex that encode for a specific odor. When the olfactory cortex is activated, the individual experiences the conscious awareness of that smell. This is how the sense of smell works.
Problems with the sense of smell can either be temporary or permanent, but is most often temporary. There are many issues that can cause a problem with the sense of smell. The most common cause is nasal congestion that comes with an upper respiratory tract infection. Other causes include nasal polyps, smoking, and anything that causes damage to the olfactory cortex of the brain or cranial nerve 1. Alright, some terminology on the sense of smell. The reduced ability to smell is called hyposmia. and the inability to smell is called anosmia. Alright, this brings us to the end of our presentation. I hope you enjoyed it and found this useful.